The message came early in the morning, sharp and impossible to misunderstand. My daughter wrote, "Don't expect me to take care of you in old age. I have my own life and family." I stared at the screen for a long time, then quietly accepted what she declared. I didn't argue or explain myself. Instead, I made a decision that same day, one that would change her future plans forever. By the next morning, the calm in my house was broken, and the consequences of her words came knocking at my door. Before I tell you how it all unfolded, do me a small favor. If stories about family, dignity, and hard choices matter to you, support this channel and leave a comment telling me where you're listening from. It helps more people hear stories like mine, and some of them may need it more than you think. I'm Samuel Rowan. I'm 72 years old, and I've lived long enough to know that silence can be louder than shouting. I built my life with my late wife, Eleanor, brick by brick, decision by decision, mistake by mistake. We weren't born into money. We earned stability the slow way. I worked as a civil engineer for over 3 decades, often leaving home before sunrise and returning with my boots dusted in concrete and gravel. Eleanor kept our world running, raising our daughter, keeping the books, stretching every dollar so nothing went to waste. Together, we bought our home in Briarwood Hills, Vermont, a modest place with maple trees lining the street and neighbors who still wave from their porches. When Eleanor died 6 years ago, it wasn't dramatic. No long goodbye, just a quiet morning, a cup of tea half finished, and a heart that decided it had carried enough. I held myself together because that's what men of my generation were taught to do. I grieved privately, paid off the last of the mortgage, organized our savings, and kept moving forward. My health stayed strong. I walked every morning. I cooked for myself. I managed my investments without help. I wasn't waiting for anyone to rescue me. Melissa, my daughter, was always ambitious. Even as a child, she wanted more than what we had. Better clothes, better schools, bigger plans. Eleanor used to say that was a good thing. That hunger drove success. Maybe she was right. Melissa married Andrew Cole, a man who spoke confidently about growth, leverage, and future positioning. They moved to a larger city not far from us, put their children in private schools, and surrounded themselves with a life that looked impressive from the outside. I stayed involved. I babysat when they needed it. I helped when they asked. I didn't interfere. I didn't lecture. I quietly transferred money when there was always some emergency, a temporary setback, a timing issue, a short-term gap. 10,000 here, 8,000 there. I never kept score. I told myself that was what fathers did. Looking back now, that's where I made my first mistake. The morning I received that message, I was sitting at my kitchen table, sunlight pouring through the window Eleanor had insisted we install years earlier. My coffee went cold as I reread the words again and again. There was no argument before it, no disagreement, just a declaration, a boundary drawn not to protect herself, but to discard me. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I felt something settle inside my chest instead, a clarity so sharp it almost felt like relief. I typed back one word, understood. That was it. Then I stood up, put on my jacket, and drove into town. Victor Langford had handled Eleanor's estate after her passing. A careful man, thorough, not the kind who rushed decisions or pushed agendas. When I walked into Langford and Hale that afternoon, he looked up from his desk and frowned slightly. "Samuel," he said, "this is unexpected. Is everything all right?" For the first time in a while, I replied, "Yes, I need to revise my will." He studied my face, probably expecting grief or anger. He saw neither. He nodded and asked me to sit. I explained nothing about the message. I didn't need to. I told him I wanted to restructure everything. My house, my investments, my savings. I wanted control, protection, finality. Victor didn't argue. He asked questions, smart ones, logical ones. By the time I left his office, the outline of something permanent had begun to take shape. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have known, was that Melissa still had access to an old joint account we'd opened years earlier, back when Eleanor was sick and we wanted an emergency option. I'd forgotten to close it. Melissa hadn't. That evening, as I sat in my living room surrounded by decades of memories, my phone rang. Melissa's name lit up the screen. I let it ring. Then it rang again. When I finally answered, her voice was sharp, edged with something I recognized immediately. Panic. "Why did you go to a lawyer?" she demanded. I smiled to myself, not out of satisfaction, but confirmation. The truth always reveals itself faster than people expect. "Because I'm allowed to," I said calmly. "You don't make decisions like that without talking to me," she snapped. "What are you doing?" "I'm organizing my affairs," I replied, something responsible adults do. "You're being dramatic," she said. "You're old, Dad. You need to think about what comes next." "I have," I said. "That's exactly what I'm doing." She hung up on me. That night, I slept better than I had in months. And when the sun rose the next morning, I had no idea that within hours, my daughter would be standing in my driveway, angry, desperate, and finally forced to face the meaning of her own words. I was pruning the hedges along the front fence when I heard tires grind sharply against gravel. Not the slow, polite arrival of a visitor, but the kind that announced impatience before the engine even shut off. I straightened slowly, my back stiff from the morning work, and watched as Melissa's car stopped crookedly in my driveway. She didn't knock. She didn't call out. She stormed straight toward the house like she still owned it. I stayed where I was. She flung the front door open and shouted my name. When I didn't answer, she came back outside and spotted me near the fence. "What did you do?" she demanded, breathless. Her face flushed red. "Do you have any idea what you've started?" I clipped one last branch, set the shears down carefully, and turned to face her. "Good morning to you, too." "This isn't a joke," she said. "The bank wouldn't tell me anything. The lawyer's office won't return my calls. You moved money. A lot of money. I reorganized my assets. I said evenly. You told me you had your own life. I'm respecting that." She laughed sharply, but there was no humor in it. "You're punishing me. That's what this is." "No," I said. "This is me listening." She stepped closer, lowering her voice as if the neighbors might overhear. "Dad, you're being irrational. You're 72. You don't make decisions like this alone." I looked at her for a long moment, really looked at her. The impatience, the calculation behind her eyes. When had she stopped seeing me as her father and started seeing me as a problem to be managed? "I've made decisions alone my entire adult life," I said, "including raising you." She scoffed. "This isn't about pride. This is about family responsibility." "Interesting," I replied. "That word didn't seem to apply when you sent that message." Her mouth tightened. I was stressed. "Then you were honest," I said. "Stress doesn't invent thoughts. It reveals them." She opened her mouth to argue, then stopped. For a moment, something flickered across her face. Fear. Real fear. Not concern for me, but for something slipping out of her control. "You can't just cut me out," she said. "Mom wouldn't have wanted this." My chest tightened at Eleanor's name, but I didn't let it show. "Your mother trusted me to protect what we built, including from entitlement." Melissa's eyes hardened. "Andrew knows about this." "That doesn't surprise me." "He's furious," she said. "We've made plans based on expectations." There it was. Not care. Not love. Expectations. "You planned your life around my death?" I asked quietly. She didn't answer. I picked up my shears again. "You should leave." "This isn't over," she snapped. "I'll talk to a lawyer. I'll prove you're not thinking clearly." I met her gaze without blinking. "Then do what you feel you must." She left without another word, slamming her car door so hard the sound echoed down the street. I stood there for a long time after she drove away, the morning air suddenly heavy. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from the realization that the distance between us had been there far longer than I'd admitted. That afternoon, I returned to Victor Langford's office. She came by. I told him. "She's threatening legal action." Victor nodded as if he'd expected it. Then we proceed carefully. "Samuel, if you want absolute protection, we should move forward with a living trust." an irrevocable one. I want it done, I said. He explained everything in detail. Once assets moved into the Samuel Rowan Heritage Trust, they would no longer be directly mine to give, lend, or be pressured into surrendering. They would be governed by the terms I set. Terms no one could rewrite on my behalf. Are you prepared for the fallout? Victor asked. I already am, I said. The following days passed in a blur of signatures, notarizations, and transfers. I closed the old joint account at Northern Crest Bank and opened a new one at Silverline Federal Trust. Ruth Caldwell, the branch manager, looked at me with concern. Is someone pressuring you, Mr. Rowan? She asked gently. No, I said. Someone tried. That's the difference. She processed everything efficiently, and by the end of the week, Melissa no longer had visibility into a single dollar of my finances. That's when the phone calls started. At first, they were angry, accusatory, demanding. I didn't answer. Then they changed. Melissa left voicemails that sounded rehearsed. Dad, please call me. We're worried about you. Andrew sent messages about misunderstandings and family unity. One evening, flowers appeared on my porch with a note that said, "We love you. Let's talk." I donated them to the senior center down the road. Victor advised me to document everything. Dates, times, messages, threats. I started a folder and labeled it simply, Record. One night, as I sat at my desk organizing paperwork, a memory surfaced uninvited. Melissa at 12 years old, standing in the same room, asking if she could borrow money from her college fund to buy something she wanted immediately. I'd said no. She'd accused me of not believing in her. Maybe this wasn't new after all. 2 weeks later, I received a letter from a law firm representing Melissa. They requested that I submit to a mental competency evaluation. I read it once, then again. Then I folded it neatly and placed it in the folder. So, this is how far you'll go, I murmured to the empty room. Victor was unbothered when I showed him the letter. Let them test you, he said. You're sharp, and once a professional confirms that, their leverage disappears. I agreed. The evaluation was thorough. 3 hours of questions, memory exercises, reasoning tests. The psychiatrist, Dr. Helen Alvarez, was calm and precise. When we finished, she smiled faintly. Mr. Rowan, you're in better cognitive health than many people 20 years younger. Her report was decisive. The hearing was scheduled 2 weeks later. Melissa didn't look at me in the courtroom. Andrew stared straight ahead, jaw clenched. Their attorney spoke about concern, vulnerability, undue influence. Victor responded with facts, documents, medical records, evidence of financial manipulation. Then the judge asked Melissa one question. Did you send your father a message stating you would not take care of him in old age? Silence. Yes, she said finally. And did he respond in anger? No. Did he threaten you? No. Then it appears he simply acted on the information you provided. The gavel struck. Case dismissed. As I walked out of the courthouse, Melissa brushed past me without a word. I didn't stop her. I didn't chase her. Some doors closed because they were never meant to stay open. That evening, I returned to my quiet house, made myself dinner, and sat alone at the table Eleanor and I had shared for decades. For the first time since that message arrived, I felt something unexpected. Peace. But peace, I would soon learn, has a way of provoking those who lose power over you. The peace didn't last long. It never does when people believe something has been taken from them, even when it was never theirs to begin with. 3 days after the hearing, a thick envelope arrived by courier. No return address. I knew before opening it who it was from. Inside was a letter written in Andrew's handwriting, careful and measured, the kind meant to sound reasonable while delivering pressure. He wrote about reconciliation, about family unity, about how misunderstandings had escalated unnecessarily. He suggested dinner, neutral ground, no lawyers, no arguments, just adults talking like adults. I folded the letter and placed it in the record folder. That same evening, Melissa called. I let it ring until it stopped. Minutes later, my phone buzzed again. A message this time. Dad, please. We need to talk. This has gone too far. Too far. I wonder how far it had gone the morning. She decided to declare she wouldn't be there for me when I needed her. Or the years I'd quietly filled gaps in their finances while pretending it was generosity, not obligation. I didn't reply. 2 days later, they showed up. I was in the living room, reading, when I heard laughter outside. Children's laughter. My stomach tightened before I even stood up. I looked through the window and saw Melissa's car parked neatly this time, Andrew beside it. And between them, Noah and Lily, holding hands. They brought my grandchildren. I opened the door before they rang the bell. "Grandpa!" Noah shouted, breaking free and running into my arms. Lily followed, shy but smiling, clutching a small paper bag. "We brought you cookies," she said softly. I hugged them both, breathing them in, my heart aching at how quickly love can be weaponized when adults lose control. Melissa stood behind them, her face carefully composed. Andrew gave me a tight nod. "We thought we'd stop by," Melissa said lightly. "The kids missed you. You should have called," I replied. "We did," Andrew said. "You didn't answer." That was true. I hadn't, for a reason. "Come in," I said finally, stepping aside. Not for them, but for the children. They settled into the living room like they belonged there. Noah sprawled on the rug with his toys. Lily climbed onto the armchair Eleanor used to sit in. Melissa placed the cookies on the table. The bag still warm, homemade, thoughtful, strategic. Small talk followed. School updates. Weather. How well the house looked. Andrew commented on the new paint on the fence. Asked if I'd hired someone or done it myself. "Myself," I said. "I still can." There was a pause. Melissa cleared her throat. "Dad, we want to apologize." "For what?" I asked. She blinked, clearly not expecting the question. "For how things were said. For hurting you. How things were said." I repeated, not what was said. Andrew leaned forward. "We're family. We should be able to move past one mistake. One message. I corrected, and years of assumptions." Melissa's smile faltered. "You're holding on to anger." "No," I said calmly. "I'm holding on to reality." She stood abruptly. "Kids, why don't you go play in the backyard?" Noah hesitated. "But Grandpa..." "Go," she said gently, too gently. The moment the door closed behind them, the air changed. Andrew's voice hardened. "Let's stop pretending. You've put us in a terrible position." "I didn't put you anywhere," I replied. "I stepped out of the position you placed me in." "You know we've been struggling," Melissa said. "You know how much pressure we're under." "You drive a new SUV," I said. "Your children attend private school. Where exactly is the struggle?" "That's none of your business." "And my money is..." She slammed her hand on the table. "We're your family. And yet," I said quietly, "you told me not to expect anything from you when I'm old." Andrew exhaled sharply. "Fine. Then let's be clear. If you don't undo this trust, if you don't restore what you've taken away, what I protected, I corrected, then you won't see the kids anymore," Melissa said flatly. The words landed like a physical blow. For a moment, I couldn't speak. I looked at the door leading to the backyard, heard Noah laughing as he chased Lily around the maple tree Eleanor loved. And suddenly, everything made sense. This was the final move, the one they'd been saving. "You'd use them," I said slowly. "Your own children." Andrew didn't deny it. "We'll do what we have to." I stood up. "Get out," I said. Melissa's eyes widened. "Dad." "Get out of my house," I repeated, my voice steady but cold. "And if you ever threaten me with my grandchildren again, I will document it. I will take it as far as it needs to go." "You wouldn't," Andrew said. "Try me." They left in a hurry, snatching the children from the yard with forced smiles and rushed goodbyes. Noah looked back at me, confused. "Grandpa," he called. "I love you," I said. "Always." The car disappeared down the street. I locked the door and leaned against it as my knees threatened to give way. My hands shook violently now, not from clarity, but from grief. That night I was sick, physically sick. The kind that comes from realizing the people you trusted most were willing to burn everything just to win. I called Victor first thing in the morning. They threatened to cut me off from my grandchildren. I said. There was a long pause. Document it, he said. Finally, every word. This is no longer just estate planning. A week later, a new letter arrived. This one formal. Legal. A demand for another evaluation. Another attempt to regain control. But something else arrived too. A notice from a mortgage company, addressed to me as an emergency contact. 3 missed payments. Risk of foreclosure. I stared at it for a long time. So that was it. The lifestyle. The pressure. The desperation. They hadn't just expected my money someday. They'd already spent it. That night, I made a call that would ensure I finally understood the full truth. One that would shatter any remaining illusions I had left about my daughter and what she had become. The investigator's name was Mark Dwyer. Victor described him as discreet, methodical, and allergic to drama. Exactly what I needed. We met in a quiet cafe on the edge of Briarwood Hills, a place Eleanor and I used to stop by after Sunday walks. Mark arrived early, ordered black coffee, and didn't waste time. Tell me what you want to know, he said. Everything. I replied. Where the money went, how long this has been going on, and whether I've been lied to more than I already know. He nodded once, wrote a few notes, and asked for names, dates, and permissions. I handed him copies of the documents Victor had prepared. When we stood to leave, Mark paused. You should be prepared, he said. What you find may make reconciliation impossible. I met his gaze. I've already crossed that bridge. The waiting was the hardest part. Not because I feared what he'd uncover, but because every unanswered question gave my mind room to invent worse possibilities. In the meantime, Melissa and Andrew went quiet. No calls, no messages, no flowers. Silence, like the calm before a storm. I filled my days deliberately. Morning walks, volunteering at Haven Paws Rescue Center, rejoining the men's breakfast group at St. Matthew's Community Fellowship. I reminded myself daily that my life did not begin or end with my daughter's approval. 2 weeks later, Mark called. I've got enough to talk, he said. In person, we met in Victor's office. Mark laid out folders across the conference table, each one labeled by year. It's not pretty, he began. Over the past 6 years, your daughter and son-in-law have spent well beyond their combined income. We're talking luxury travel, memberships, cosmetic procedures, private tuition, vehicles. None of it aligned with what they earned. He slid a spreadsheet toward me. Numbers stared back like accusations. They've been covering gaps with loans, he continued. Multiple lenders. Short-term, high interest. And here's the critical part. Those loans were issued based on anticipated inheritance. My stomach dropped. They borrowed against my death, I said. Yes, Mark replied calmly. They represented you as elderly, wealthy, and cooperative. I closed my eyes for a moment. Eleanor's face flashed through my mind. What would she have said if she were here? Probably something sharp, followed by something kind. She had a way of balancing truth with grace. I felt her absence acutely then. There's more, Mark said. He slid another folder across the table. Email correspondence, he explained, between Andrew and an estate attorney. Dated 3 years ago. I opened it with shaking hands. Andrew's words were clinical. Curious. He asked about accelerating inheritance timelines, about options when parents were uncooperative. The attorney's replies were brief and firm. Refusals, warnings, boundaries. But the intent was unmistakable. He's been planning this. I whispered. Victor exhaled slowly. Samuel, this crosses into potential fraud, and possibly elder exploitation. Can we press charges? I asked. Yes, Victor said. The evidence supports it. I imagine Melissa in handcuffs. Noah and Lily visiting their parents through glass. Headlines. Shame. A scorched earth ending. No, I said after a long silence. Not like that. Victor studied me. You're sure? I want them to know I know, I said. And I want them to understand it's over. But I won't destroy my grandchildren's lives to prove a point. We drafted a letter together. Clear, factual, unemotional. It detailed what I knew, what I would not do, and what I expected moving forward. No money, no negotiation, no access to me through threats or manipulation. I added one final paragraph myself. If you ever choose to apologize without expectation, without leverage, and without entitlement, my door remains open to conversation, not to finances, to truth. The letter was delivered by courier. 3 weeks passed without a response. Then on Christmas Eve, there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find Noah and Lily standing in the snow, bundled in coats too thin for the cold, holding the hand of a woman I didn't recognize. Melissa's car was parked down the street. Andrew sat in the driver's seat, staring straight ahead. The woman introduced herself as a court-appointed supervisor. Your daughter has agreed to supervise visitation, she said gently, due to ongoing proceedings. Proceedings? The word echoed. The children spent 2 hours with me. We baked cookies, read stories, laughed. Lily fell asleep on my shoulder. When it was time to leave, Noah hugged me tight. Can we come back? He asked. Anytime, I said. As the car pulled away, Melissa never once looked at my house. I stood alone in the doorway long after the street fell quiet, snow settling softly on the steps Eleanor used to sweep every winter. I hadn't won the way I once imagined victory, but I had something better, my dignity, and I wasn't finished yet. Winter settled fully over Briarwood Hills after that visit. The kind of winter that quiets everything it touches. Snow softened the edges of houses, muted footsteps, and gave the illusion that nothing bad could happen beneath its cover. But I'd lived long enough to know that silence doesn't mean safety. Sometimes it means people are planning. The supervised visits continued once a month. Always brief. Always watched. The woman assigned was professional, kind, and observant. She never interfered, but she noticed everything. The way Melissa avoided my eyes. The way Andrew stayed in the car or paced the sidewalk like a caged animal. The way Noah clung to me just a little longer each time they had to leave. Those hours were both a gift and a wound. They reminded me of what I loved and what had been turned into leverage against me. Between visits, my life expanded in ways I hadn't expected. I volunteered more hours at Haven Paws. I joined a small book circle at Finch and Leaf Books in Seabourn Point, where my old friend Harold Finch still ran the register with ink-stained fingers and a sharp sense of humor. I started painting again, something I hadn't done since Eleanor's early illness. The first few canvases were dark, heavy with shadows. Then, slowly, color returned. People often assume that when family betrays you, your world shrinks. Mine didn't. It clarified. That clarity helped when the next letter arrived. This one wasn't legal. No letterhead. No formal tone. Just Melissa's handwriting, unmistakable, looping and familiar in a way that stirred memories I wish would stay buried. Dad, I don't know how we got here. I never wanted things to be like this. I was scared. We were under so much pressure, and I said things I shouldn't have. Please don't let this be how our story ends. I read it twice. Then a third time. There was no apology in it, no ownership, only fear of consequences and a vague appeal to history, as if the past could erase the present. I placed a letter in the record folder. A week later, Andrew tried a different approach. He showed up alone. It was late afternoon when I heard the knock. Not aggressive, not hesitant, controlled. I opened the door and found him standing there, hands in his coat pockets, eyes darting briefly to the sides as if checking for witnesses. Samuel, he said, may I come in? No, I replied. Say what you came to say. He nodded once, accepting the boundary. We're losing the house. I waited. The bank won't renegotiate, he continued. We're behind on everything. Creditors are circling. And I asked, and you could stop it, he said. One phone call. One signature. I studied him. The confidence was gone. The polish cracked. What remained was desperation stripped of charm. You borrowed against money that wasn't yours. I said, that's not my emergency. He swallowed. The kids. Don't. I warned quietly. He exhaled sharply. You really are going to let us fail. I'm letting you face reality. I replied. I faced mine the morning your wife told me not to expect anything from her. His jaw tightened. You're enjoying this. No, I said. If I were enjoying it, I'd have pressed charges. That caught his attention. His eyes widened just enough. You know, he asked. I know enough, I said. And you should leave before you say something else you can't undo. He stood there for a moment longer, as if weighing one final argument. Then he nodded and walked away without another word. 2 months later, the foreclosure became official. I didn't celebrate. I didn't gloat. I sat in my kitchen with a cup of tea and stared out the window at the bare branches of the maple tree. Consequences are rarely satisfying when they involve people you once loved. Melissa and Andrew declared bankruptcy shortly after. The private school withdrew Noah and Lily mid-semester. Their SUV was repossessed. They moved in with Andrew's parents in another state. The supervised visits were adjusted accordingly, still allowed but logistically harder. One evening, after a particularly quiet day, I received an email from Clara Whitmore, my niece. She'd heard bits and pieces through family channels I no longer monitored. Uncle Sam, I don't know everything, but I know enough to say this. You did nothing wrong. Setting boundaries isn't cruelty. It's survival. I'm proud of you. I stared at the screen longer than necessary. Sometimes validation comes from places you least expect. Spring arrived slowly that year. The snow melted. The maple tree budded. I resumed my morning walks without gloves, feeling the stiffness of my joints ease with movement. My doctor smiled at my test results and told me to keep doing whatever I was doing. What I was doing was living deliberately. The Samuel Rowan Heritage Trust began its work quietly. Scholarships awarded. Donations delivered. Letters of gratitude arrived from students and families I would never meet. Each one reminded me that legacy isn't about bloodlines. It's about impact. One afternoon, while sorting mail, I found a small envelope addressed in careful, uneven handwriting. It was from Noah. Dear Grandpa, I miss you. I'm learning to read better now. When I'm big, I want to build things like you. Love, Noah. I pressed the letter to my chest and closed my eyes. That night, I sat at my desk and began writing 2 letters of my own. One for Noah, one for Lily. They wouldn't be sent yet. They were meant for the future, for the day they were old enough to understand truth without bitterness. I wrote about choices, about respect, about how love doesn't demand surrender. As I sealed the envelopes and placed them in my safe, I realized something profound. The power I'd reclaimed wasn't just financial. It was a power to define my ending. And whatever storms still lay ahead, I would meet them standing, no longer afraid of being abandoned, because I had already chosen myself. By early summer, the rhythm of my days had settled into something steady and dependable. Morning walks before the town stirred. Coffee on the porch. Letters answered. Books finished. The kind of routine that doesn't numb you, but steadies you. I had learned, late in life, that peace isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It arrives quietly once you stop chasing people who don't want to walk beside you. The supervised visits with Noah and Lily continued, though less frequently because of the distance. When they did happen, they were careful affairs, scheduled weeks in advance, held in neutral spaces, always watched. Still, the children adapted quickly. They always do. Noah had lost one front tooth and was proud of the gap. Lily insisted on brushing my hair with a tiny pink brush she brought every time. Melissa rarely spoke during those visits. She stayed polite, distant, as if acknowledging me too warmly might reopen something she couldn't afford to face. Andrew was colder. He didn't hide his resentment anymore. But resentment is heavy, and carrying it ages you faster than time. One afternoon, after a visit ended and the supervisor had escorted the children away, Melissa lingered by her car. She looked thinner, tired. For a brief moment, she seemed like the daughter I remembered, the one who used to sit at my feet while I fixed things, asking questions just to hear my voice. Dad, she said quietly. I waited. I never thought you'd really let go, she continued. I thought eventually you'd soften. I didn't harden, I replied. I clarified. She nodded, eyes on the ground. We're barely getting by. I know. You could still help, she said, almost whispering. I shook my head. That would help you survive another month. It wouldn't help you change. Her eyes filled, but there was no anger this time, only exhaustion. I don't know how to fix this, she admitted. That's the first honest thing you said to me in a long time, I said gently, and it's where repair actually begins. She looked up sharply. So there's still a chance? There's always a chance for respect, I said, not for entitlement. She didn't argue. She just nodded, got into her car, and drove away. That night, I sat alone in the living room, the windows open, summer air drifting in. Eleanor's photograph sat on the mantel, her smile froze in a moment when the world had still made sense. I spoke to her then, quietly, like I often did. I did my best, I said. I hope you'd understand. I imagine her answer easily. She always believed that love without boundaries wasn't love at all. It was fear wearing kindness like a disguise. A week later, Victor called. There's been a development, he said. Nothing threatening. Just something you should know. I listened as he explained that Andrew had attempted to refinance one of their remaining loans using projected future gifts from me as leverage. It hadn't worked. The lenders were no longer convinced. They're still clinging to the idea that you'll change your mind, Victor said. I won't, I replied. I know, he said, but be prepared. Desperation makes people reckless. He was right. 2 weeks later, Andrew sent me an email. Not legal, not apologetic, just blunt. You're destroying your family out of pride. When the kids grow up and ask why you abandoned them, remember this moment. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I forwarded the message to Victor and added it to the record folder. Manipulation thrives in private. Documentation drags it into the light. That same evening, I receive a call from the supervisor. I felt you should know, she said carefully. There have been concerns raised about how the children are being spoken to regarding you. My chest tightened. What kind of concerns? They're being told you chose money over them, she said. That you didn't want to see them. The lie landed heavier than any threat had before. Thank you for telling me, I said. What happens now? I've filed a report, she replied. The court will review it. After the call ended, I sat motionless for several minutes. Then I stood, went to my desk, and pulled out the 2 letters I'd written for Noah and Lily. I reread them, then began writing 2 more, shorter ones this time, addressed to the present. I kept the word simple, honest, child safe. I love you. I have never stopped loving you. Grown-ups sometimes make choices that are confusing, but my love for you is not one of them. I sealed the envelopes and gave them to Victor the next day to be delivered through proper channels. The court responded faster than I expected. Andrew and Melissa were warned formally. Any further attempts to manipulate the children would result in restricted access. The threat stopped after that. Silence followed. Real silence. Not the tense kind. The resigned kind. Summer deepened. My garden flourished. The roses Eleanor loved bloomed brighter than they had in years. I spent afternoons painting them, capturing the light, the way petals curled the edges like tired smiles. One afternoon, while at Finch and Leaf Books in Seabourn Point, Harold poured me tea and studied one of my sketches. You look lighter, he said. I am, I replied. Still hurts, though. Yes, I admitted, but it doesn't owe me any more. He nodded. That's the trick, isn't it? It was. In August, I received a call I hadn't expected. It was from Clara. Uncle Sam, she said, excitement barely contained. I got accepted into a graduate program. Full scholarship. That's wonderful, I said, smiling. It's because of you, she continued. The recommendation you wrote, the confidence you showed in me. I just wanted you to know it mattered. After we hung up, I sat quietly, letting the moment sink in. Legacy isn't loud. Sometimes it's a phone call that reminds you your choices echoed somewhere good. That night, as I prepared dinner, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It's Melissa. I don't expect anything. I just want you to know I'm starting therapy. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I replied, I hope it helps. Truly, no lecture, no condition, just truth. I didn't know where that path would lead for her, or for us, but for the first time, it didn't feel like my responsibility to drag her down it. As autumn approached, I realized something else had changed. I no longer waited for the phone to ring, and that, more than anything else, told me I had finally reclaimed my life. Autumn arrived gently in Briarwood Hills, the kind that didn't announce itself with storms, but with color. The maple outside my house turned first, leaves shifting from green to amber almost overnight. Eleanor used to love this season. She said it reminded her that change didn't have to be violent to be permanent. I thought about that often now. The silence from Melissa lasted nearly a month. No messages, no calls, no indirect attempts through lawyers or supervisors. At first, I suspected strategy. I'd learned not to trust quiet after everything we'd been through. But as the days passed, I realized something else was happening. She wasn't plotting. She was adjusting to a reality where I no longer functioned as a safety net she could pull tight whenever life pressed in. I didn't celebrate that realization. I accepted it. One afternoon, while sorting old papers in the study, I came across a small notebook Eleanor used to keep tucked into a drawer. It was filled with lists, groceries, reminders, occasional thoughts scribbled in the margins. Near the back, I found a page written in firmer strokes. Teach Melissa independence without abandoning her. I closed the notebook and sat there for a long time. Had I failed at that? Or had I simply reached the moment Eleanor knew would come eventually? The moment when teaching meant stepping back? A week later, Victor called again. I want to prepare you, he said. There's been a filing. From Andrew? I asked. Yes, Victor replied. Not directly against you. He's contesting the supervised visitation arrangement. He wants it lifted. I exhaled slowly. On what grounds? He claims you're alienating the children. I laughed once, humorless. By not paying their parents' debts? Victor didn't laugh. We'll handle it. But you should be present at the hearing. The hearing was set for mid-October. Another courtroom. Another bench. Another attempt to rewrite reality through legal language. Melissa sat alone this time. Andrew wasn't there. That told me more than any affidavit could. Whatever alliance they'd built around money was fracturing under pressure. The judge reviewed the supervisor's reports carefully. The documented attempts to manipulate the children. The messages Andrew had sent. The letters I'd written, explaining love without blame. When Melissa was asked to speak, she hesitated. I never wanted to hurt my children, she said quietly. Or my father. The judge looked at her steadily. Intent doesn't erase impact. Andrew's request was denied. The supervision remained in place. Outside the courtroom, Melissa approached me hesitantly. I didn't know he filed that, she said. I believe you, I replied. She looked surprised. You do? I believe you didn't stop it, I added. She flinched, then nodded. That's fair. We stood there awkwardly, father and daughter reduced to strangers sharing a last name and a complicated history. I'm trying, she said. I really am. I see that, I replied. Trying isn't the same as changing, but it's a start. She wiped her eyes quickly. I don't expect forgiveness. Good, I said gently. Expect growth. She managed a small, sad smile before turning away. That winter was colder than usual, the kind that crept into your bones and lingered. I spent more time indoors, painting and reading, attending community dinners at the church. People noticed my presence more, not because I demanded it, but because I was finally available, fully present, not distracted by fear of abandonment or guilt disguised as obligation. During one of the supervised visits in December, Noah surprised me. Mom says you're not mad anymore, he said as we colored together. I was never mad at you, I replied. Are you mad at Mom? He asked, earnest and worried. I chose my words carefully. I'm not mad. I'm careful. He nodded as if that made sense. Children understand more than we think, when we don't burden them with adult poison. Lily climbed into my lap and rested her head against my chest. Your heart is loud, she said sleepily. I smiled. That's because it's working hard. The supervisor watched quietly, taking notes. On Christmas morning, I woke up alone and content. I made breakfast, opened a few cards from friends, and took a long walk through the snow-covered neighborhood. That afternoon, I received a package from Melissa. Inside were 2 small photo albums, pictures of Noah and Lily growing over the past year. No note, no explanation. I placed the albums on the shelf beside Eleanor's photograph. That night, as I sat by the window watching snowfall, my phone buzzed. Thank you for not giving up on them, Melissa wrote. I stared at the message for a long time. I never did, I replied. I just stopped giving up on myself. January brought a letter I hadn't expected, from Andrew's attorney. He was filing for separation. The document was clinical, efficient, emotionless. I felt no satisfaction reading it, only sadness, not for the marriage, but for the years wasted chasing an illusion of security instead of building something real. Melissa called me 2 days later. Her voice was raw. He's leaving, she said. I don't know what to do. I closed my eyes. This was the moment I'd anticipated and prepared for, the test of every boundary I'd set. I'm sorry, I said. That's painful. Silence. Can you help me? She asked finally. With advice, I said. With emotional support. With helping you find resources. And money? She asked, almost inaudible. No, I said. She cried then. Not dramatically. Quietly. The kind of crying that comes when illusions finally collapse. I understand, she said after a long pause. And for the first time, I believed her. Spring crept back into Briarwood Hills the following year, hesitant and hopeful. Melissa moved into a smaller apartment closer to her work. The children adjusted. The supervised visits slowly transitioned into longer, more relaxed ones, still structured, still safe. One afternoon, as Noah helped me plant seedlings in the garden, he looked up and asked, Grandpa, are you proud of Mom? I considered the question carefully. I'm proud of the choices she's making now. I said, that's what matters. He smiled and returned to his work. As I watched him, hands dirty, focused and earnest, I felt something loosen in my chest. Not forgiveness. Resolution. I had chosen dignity over fear. Clarity over comfort. And in doing so, I hadn't lost my family. I had redefined it. There were still scars. There always would be. But scars mean wounds healed, not wounds hidden. And as the leaves began to bud once more, I knew something with absolute certainty. The story wasn't over yet. But whatever ending awaited me, it would be written on my terms. By late spring, the air in Briarwood Hills carried that familiar scent of damp earth and promise. The town always seemed to breathe again after winter, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was breathing with it instead of fighting against it. The supervised visits had eased into something more natural. Not because the court suddenly trusted everyone, but because patterns had changed. Melissa had changed. Slowly, unevenly, but enough to matter. Andrew was gone for good now. The divorce moved forward without theatrics. No dramatic claims. No last-minute demands involving me. He disappeared into his own consequences. And for once, that wasn't my burden to carry. I didn't follow the details. I didn't ask. Some doors are better left closed, not out of bitterness, but out of wisdom. Melissa showed up one Saturday morning with Noah and Lily, earlier than expected. No supervisor this time, just a short approved visit, a trial of sorts. She stood on the porch, uncertain, as if she wasn't sure whether to knock or turn around and leave. You're early, I said when I opened the door. I know, she replied. I can wait in the car if... No, I said gently. Come in. The children rushed past her, shoes half off, laughter echoing through the house like it used to. Lily ran straight to the bookshelf, pulling out the old picture books Eleanor had collected. Noah headed for the backyard, already planning something involving sticks and imaginary construction projects. Melissa lingered near the doorway, hands clasped tightly. You don't have to stand there, I said. Sit if you want. She sat on the edge of the sofa, posture stiff, like a guest afraid of overstaying her welcome. "I've been going to therapy," she said suddenly. "Twice a week." I nodded. "That's work. Not everyone is willing to do it." She looked down at her hands. They made me talk about money, about control, about why I thought love and security were the same thing. And I asked, and I didn't like the answers, she admitted, but they made sense. I watched her closely, not for weakness, but for sincerity. It was there, not polished, not convincing, just real. "I hurt you," she said quietly, "not just with that message, with years of assumptions. I thought you'd always be there to catch us. I never asked if you wanted to be." "That's true," I said. "You didn't." She swallowed hard. "I'm sorry." It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't followed by a request. It simply existed. I didn't respond right away. I listened to the sounds of my grandchildren in the yard, to the quiet hum of a life, continuing despite everything. "I accept that," I said finally, not as erasure, as a beginning. Her shoulders sagged, relief mixing with exhaustion. "I don't expect things to go back to how they were." "They can't," I replied, "and they shouldn't." She nodded again, tears in her eyes, but she didn't cry. She stayed present. That afternoon passed quietly. We made lunch. Noah insisted on helping, which meant more mess than progress. Lily fell asleep on the couch with a book open on her chest. Melissa watched them with a kind of reverence, like someone relearning something precious. When it was time for them to leave, she hesitated at the door. "Thank you," she said, "for today, for not closing it completely." I looked at her, really looked at her. My daughter, older now, worn in places I hadn't seen before. I didn't close the door, I said. I locked the parts that were hurting me. She nodded, understanding more than she ever had. The visits continued, carefully, respectfully, sometimes awkwardly, but without threats, without leverage, without money changing hands. The children adjusted easily. They always do when adults stop using them as shields. One afternoon, months later, Noah asked me a question that caught me off guard. "Grandpa," he said as we worked in the garden, "is it bad to need help?" "No," I said. "It's bad to pretend help is owed instead of given." He thought about that seriously. "So you have to ask?" "Yes," I said, "and you have to accept the answer." He nodded, satisfied. Melissa found work she liked. Not glamorous, not easy, but honest. She downsized her life without complaint, sold things, let go of others. I watched from a distance, offering advice when asked, never money. Not once did she ask again. That mattered more than any apology. The Samuel Rowan Heritage Trust continued quietly in the background, doing what it was meant to do. Letters arrived from students at Westbridge Technical University. One wrote about being the first in his family to attend college. Another about studying late nights with borrowed books and borrowed courage. I read every letter carefully, feeling something solid and right settle into my chest. I volunteered more at St. Aldewood Children's Medical Center, reading to children whose courage dwarfed anything I'd ever faced. Their parents often thanked me with tired smiles. I told them the truth, that being there helped me as much as it helped their children. Life wasn't perfect. It never is. There were days when grief for Eleanor hit unexpectedly, when I reached for my phone to tell her something and remembered she wasn't there. There were moments when I looked at Melissa and saw both the child she had been and the woman she still struggled to become. But there was no fear anymore. No fear of abandonment. No fear of being used. No fear of standing alone. One evening, as summer gave way to another autumn, Melissa stayed after the children had gone to bed. We sat at the kitchen table, the same one where I'd read that message months ago. Years ago now, it felt like, "I used to think you were punishing me," she said quietly, "taking everything away." "I wasn't taking," I said. "I was protecting." She nodded. "I see that now. I wish it hadn't taken losing so much to understand. Understanding usually has a price." I replied, "Wisdom is deciding to pay it once." She smiled faintly. "You're different." "I'm older," I said. "There's a difference." She laughed softly, the sound cautious but genuine. When she left that night, I sat alone at the table and realized something important. I wasn't waiting for closure anymore. I had it, not because everything was healed, but because I no longer needed things to be perfect to be whole. The maple tree outside had begun to change again, leaves drifting down like quiet reminders that cycles don't end. They transform. And as I turned off the lights and headed upstairs, I felt a certainty settle deep in my bones. Whatever came next, whatever storms, whatever joys, I would meet them grounded, awake, and unafraid. Because the man who once feared being left behind had finally learned how to stand on his own. The last year of my life didn't arrive with fireworks or dramatic announcements. It came quietly, the way most truths do, settling into place once the noise fades. I turned 73 that winter. No big party. Just a small dinner with friends from church, Harold from Seabourn Point, Clara visiting from out of town, and, most surprising to some, Melissa and the children. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't sentimental. It was real. Noah helped me blow out the candles, counting too fast and laughing when we missed one. Lily insisted on choosing the cake and picked something pink and ridiculous. Melissa watched them with a softness I hadn't seen in years. She didn't hover. She didn't perform. She simply existed in the room, present. That mattered more than apologies ever could. After dinner, when the children were distracted with a board game, Melissa pulled me aside. "I know you're not changing your trust," she said quietly. "I'm not," I replied. "I don't want you to," she added. "I just wanted you to know I'm not building my life around it anymore." I looked at her then, not as the daughter who had once wounded me deeply, but as a woman finally standing on her own legs. "That's all I ever wanted," I said. She nodded, eyes glossy, but she didn't cry. She hugged me instead, carefully, respectfully. That night, after everyone left and the house returned to its familiar quiet, I sat alone in my study and opened the safe. Inside were the letters I'd written long ago, 2 for Noah, 2 for Lily. I reread them slowly, then placed them back. They would understand someday. Or they wouldn't. Either way, the truth would be there when they were ready. Spring came again, as it always does. My morning walks grew longer. My lungs stayed strong. My doctor shook his head at my test results and told me, half joking, that I was setting an unreasonable standard for men my age. "What's your secret?" he asked. "I stopped carrying other people's guilt," I said. He laughed, but I meant it. Melissa's life stabilized. Not dramatically, just steadily. She paid off debts one at a time. She learned to live without shortcuts. She stopped explaining herself to people who didn't care to understand. I saw her grow quieter, but stronger. Andrew faded into the background of our lives completely. No more threats. No more messages. Just absence. And for once, absence wasn't painful. It was appropriate. The supervised visits ended formally in early summer. The paperwork came and went without ceremony. No courtroom. No speeches. Just a notice in the mail stating that restrictions were lifted. The first unsupervised visit felt strange. I won't pretend otherwise. Melissa arrived with the children and stood in the doorway like someone stepping onto unfamiliar ground. "You don't have to stay," I told her. "Or you can. Your choice." She stayed for a bit, then left the children with me and drove away.